This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So good afternoon. I'm glad you're all here today. And today we're going to be discussing a portion of the cardiovascular system, in particular, the blood, and how important that is to the overall health of the human being, and really the importance of what it does as far as carrying oxygen to the tissues, removing CO2, carrying nutrients, carrying hormones that we discussed in the endocrine chapter, those chemical messengers produced in one area of the body, sent to another area for this target tissue to cause some type of action. We're talking about different components of the blood, the different cells of the blood. So let's begin, and we'll look at also some different types of disorders. So sticky fluid containing. Now here's the key issue here as far as plasma blood is concerned. It contains plasma. Plasma is the liquid portion of the blood, and it's primarily composed of water. Also containing what are called formed elements. We call them the blood cells. So we have the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. And these platelets, also known as thrombocytes, these are what are important as far as our ability to be able to clot if there's some type of damage to blood vessels. Right? You'll see here that 4 to 5 liters of blood is what's flowing throughout the body, depending upon male or female. Males can have a little bit more, depending upon size. That can also be a contributing factor. Right? Interesting here that contributes to about 6 to 8%, almost 10% of the body weight. That's quite interesting. I mentioned to you just before there that the fluid portion we call the plasma, okay? And I said that it's primarily made up of water. And you'll notice here that plasma proteins determine the blood fluid volume. So what goes on is that an important aspect of the blood is that it contains these proteins. These plasma proteins will help in order to carry substances in the blood. Okay, they'll actually, so different things can actually piggyback onto these plasma proteins, and in particular, albumin is one of them. Is the highest amount of plasma proteins would be in the form of albumin. Okay? And I said to you before, so hormones, so we say gases, we can say nutrients like glucose, like sugars, right? Amino acids, these are the building blocks for proteins. Proteins can actually travel through, as well as ions, right? Calcium, magnesium, sodium, I said potassium, right? So yeah, so just very important. Chloride ions, or all these different ions can pass through, and they're very important as far as we know. Calcium in particular, very important and crucial. Sodium, potassium for muscle contraction, for the function of the nervous system. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have quite a dry throat today. Might have to go get a drink. Let's see how it goes. You'll see here, as far as if we were to break down the components of blood, right? So we would say that primarily we have this yellow region right here would be the plasma portion, and then we have the cellular portion. And only a very small percentage, less than 1%, would be considered white blood cells and platelets. Excuse me, folks, I'm gonna need to get a drink of water. I'll be right back. Okay. All right, thank you for that there. Okay, so we have the cellular components. So primarily the cellular components would be comprised of the red blood cells. We also call them erythrocytes, okay? And these are what are really important, involved in the transport of oxygen and CO2 in particular, okay? You'll see that the white blood cells, the leukocytes, they're involved primarily more in your immune function of the body, okay? And we'll look at the platelets as far as their role in clotting, okay? Now you'll see here also that as far as the plasma portion is concerned, right? Look at that, 91 to 92% is primarily water component, okay? Upon which, right, the cells, the cellular component is floating through, is in suspension with. You'll see here as far as, so the plasma proteins, albumins, globulins, fibrinogen. So the globulins are involved also in a defense mode, right, as far as the immune system is concerned. And I'll talk about that when we look at the lymphatic system and your immune response. So think in terms of, so your antibodies would be considered a type of globulin type protein, okay? And these antibodies have a very important specific role as far as your specific immunity. You'll see here also that roles in extracellular fluid volume. So because there are the solutes present within the liquid, it helps to retain the liquid within the blood vessels. And all the liquid does not just diffuse out of the blood vessels in the capillary regions, and then we're not left with any fluid whatsoever within the cardiovascular system. So having these plasma proteins helps to hold on to the water within the blood vessels. It's very important. Some does leach out, right? Some does actually exit from the cardiovascular system and will actually become part of the lymphatic system, enter and become what's called lymph. And we'll talk about that next week, okay? So the plasma portion, very important, as well as the cellular portion. I've given this to you here as far as this is something I didn't make up, but it's important for you to see that as far as the type of white blood cells are concerned, the highest number would be the neutrophils. The lowest number present within the blood would be the basophils, okay? And so this is just a mnemonic that we use in the anatomy class, and just to show you here, never let monkeys eat bananas. So we have the neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. So basophils, the least number flowing through the cardiovascular system. The neutrophils are the greater number. Here you're seeing as far as the different stem cells that will produce. So you'll see here a lymphoid stem cell will produce the lymphocytes. And in particular, we have two different types, the B and the T lymphocytes. The B lymphocytes will produce antibodies that I just mentioned briefly there. And the T lymphocytes will have very important function as far as for the actual stimulation of the specific immune response. And those B lymphocytes, the antibodies, they're also involved in that specific immune response. And we'll talk about these other different leukocytes also. And as well as you can see here from these megakaryocytes, these very large cells, pieces of them will be broken off with nuclei, right? And these are the platelets. As I said before there, as far as the red blood cells are concerned, so the they're also AKA, also known as erythrocytes, and primarily it's carrying oxygen and carrying a small percentage or small portion of CO2 as returning back to the respiratory system, to the lungs, to the pulmonic circulation. You'll see here, I mentioned to you before, as far as those white blood cells, again, involved in the defense function, involved in your immunity. And the platelets, you'll see there as far as, again, blood clotting, very important. You'll see that, and what's quite important and to know is that the red blood cells, they don't last that long. You know, we're talking 3 to 4 months. White blood cells, some of them can only last a very short period of time, like the neutrophils, but there are certain types of specific immune cells, B and T lymphocytes, that can last for many years. And this helps to give you and be a part of your, and they're called memory B and T cells, and they're a part of the memory that your body has with an encounter with some type of pathogen that could make you sick, right? So very important. So there are some of these white blood cells that are old. Quite interesting. All right, let's move on. So the transportation of oxygen, key function, very important. Without oxygen, tissues die. Simple as that, right? And so this is what happens, unfortunately, when someone has a myocardial infarction. They have a blockage in a vessel, coronary vessel, and then anything that would be distal to that blockage, anything that the blood is being blocked from going to an area of the heart, that portion of the heart tissue would die. And then it's replaced with scar tissue. So that's not tissue that's functioning like the cardiac muscle. And so that can be a problem indeed. So hemoglobin, this is a protein, and its function is in carrying oxygen. It binds, so oxygen, you'll see here at the bottom here, binds with iron in the hemoglobin. So iron is very important. So we can have deficiencies in iron that can affect how oxygen is transported to the tissues, and that's a problem. So you'll see here as far as factors influencing the amount of oxygen hemoglobin can carry, right? So really what goes on is that the amount of oxygen present and also temperature and acidity can be factors that can affect it. So interesting here to note that hemoglobin more likely to bind to oxygen in a relatively cool temperature and neutral pH. Okay? Having a lower pH and more of an acidic pH to your overall body balance is not a positive or good thing. Cancer cells thrive in more of an acidic environment. Your pH should be a little bit on the alkaline side of like about 7.2 or so. Okay, that's what the blood would be, about 7.2 pH. So it's a little bit more alkaline than it is neutral. 7 is neutral pH. An interesting cool environment. So is it harder to breathe in when it's hot out, when it's quite hot out, right? That can affect as far as your ability to transport the oxygen, just having a higher temp. Also, we know that atmosphere. So if you're in a higher atmosphere, that can also affect how much oxygen you're able to take in. And so athletes will, if they have to go to a part of the world that would, like Mexico City, higher elevation, and if they have, they'll go and actually train for months in an area where it's a higher elevation in order to then be able to compete at the high level that they're used to competing at in lower elevation, because their body has to get used to that. So
yeah, Denver is a good example, right? The Mile
yes,
High City.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, good. Thank you. That's good, Will. Excellent. So you'll see here as far as hemoglobin, the protein. So look at how complex it is as far as it's all twisted and there's a lot of conformation to it. It's a large twisted protein, right? And it'll have within iron present in order to allow for it to have the ability to be able to carry oxygen. Very unique in its structure. That's what I would like you to pull from this, is that really your blood cells, your red blood cells, are very unique. And know this, that also that your red blood cells do not have a nucleus, right? When they are present within the blood and they're flowing within the blood and they're doing their job as far as carrying oxygen and also working with CO2 and the transport of CO2, that primarily, well, not primarily, they do not have a nucleus present, okay? So they're anucleate, we would say. And you'll see here, like I said before, 120 days approximate, right? 4 months there. Macrophages. So let me take it back here for a moment. Okay. So you see this type of cell right here. So a monocyte, it's a type of white blood cell, okay? And after a very short period of time, a monocyte will become a macrophage. You see here it says monocyte and then it says macrophage. So these macrophages really are like the cleanup crew of the human body, and they will be in different organs and tissues present in different organs of the body as well as in the blood, and they will be involved in disposing of and recycling of old red blood cells as far as, and also other types of cells. I'll read that in a moment there. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So stem cells, I showed you that image there before, in the red bone marrow, produce the new red blood cells, and they produce the other blood cells also. So recall that when we were looking at the skeletal system, I mentioned to you that there's yellow and red marrow. So red marrow is what will actually produce the red blood cells and produce the other blood cells, and yellow marrow is more for an area of storage of adipose tissue. And know that if there's a case where if there's Vito, you're funny. If there's a case of a need for more blood cells and more red bone marrow, the yellow marrow can transition to red bone marrow. Okay. Complete blood count. So this is a matter of actually then, as the term says, complete. You're looking at all the blood cells. So the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets in a liter of blood. We have here as far as function, so homeostasis and red blood cell count. So just like any other cell count, any other ion concentration, blood glucose levels, blood pressure, temperature, body temp, right, core temp, there needs to be homeostasis mechanisms taking place within the body in order to maintain healthy levels. And if levels of, so in this case, red blood cells, if the red blood cell count goes up too high or too low, that's a problem, right? So then the kidneys, right? Interesting, kidneys will monitor blood's oxygen level and will then in turn, right? If it becomes too low, then that's a way of the body knowing and the kidneys knowing that, hey, there must be a lower count of erythrocytes, red blood cells, flowing in order to not carry enough oxygen to the tissues. So as such, EPO, it's a hormone, okay? This will stimulate the stem cells within the red marrow to produce more red blood cells. Now, you'll see here as far as this blood doping. So in the case of, let's see here, so Armstrong and a couple of other team members, as well as pretty much any of the people who really are very competitive as far as bike racing is concerned. And I don't recall what exactly you would call that type of racing. Does anybody know offhand that type of racing that they do? They're going through the mountains and such, and it's really quite cool. I mean, quite amazing. And they are such high-level athletes. Sad thing is that it's very competitive, just like any other sport, very competitive. And so, you know, you don't just play to play, you play to win, and you compete in order to win. And so it's very tough. And so what they'll do is, since they can't do certain types of medications and drugs that can enhance their performance, they'll do things like, one, they'll actually, you'll see here, athletes' blood is withdrawn, stored. Then what'll happen is that stored blood is injected prior to an athletic event. Folks, they were doing this in like hotel rooms, which, think about how probably unsanitary a hotel room would be, and then even in a high level, you know, hotel, and then to actually, you're doing blood transfusions prior to the event. And what goes on is that, think about this for a moment. If I increase the amount of blood cells flowing through my blood, can that increase the viscosity? So will blood be thicker, so to speak, right? It's going to, you know, viscosity when you think of oil, so motor oil, and, you know, the thicker viscosity kind of flows slower, right? Well, imagine the viscosity of blood if there's more blood cells present within. That can be a scary thing. So one, they are correct in that it's going to carry more oxygen to the tissues, which will help performance-wise. But here's the other problem too, that it can actually lead to a heart attack. Can lead to other issues where, you know, you've got more blood cells flowing through, and so it's a pretty scary thing, and it's a pretty dangerous thing to do. You know, again too, people will do things in you know, for competition that you wouldn't normally think would be a wise thing to do. Put it that way. So this is interesting. So let's go here. So one, you'll see that there's a reduced oxygen present within the blood. So the kidneys monitor this, right? They're looking for oxygen levels. And if it's too low, well, then what's going to happen? So we're going to then release EPO, okay? EPO will then go to the red marrow, which will then produce blood cells, right? So the red blood cells develop in the red bone marrow, and we're going to have an increased level of red blood cells present within the circulation, which will then go to the kidney, and we'll see that, hey, not the red blood cells per se, although we are going to have a lot of blood flowing through kidneys, because know that filtration of blood produces a filtrate, which becomes urine. Okay? But it's really the oxygen levels that are going to rise as a result of an increased amount of red blood cells present within the blood. And so that's that mechanism, that this negative feedback mechanism, in order to see that, hey, once the levels are enough, then we're going to then do what? We're not going to kick out EPO, because we don't need to have as much flowing, because yes, there needs to always be a level, but not a higher level, right? It's in order to produce red blood cells. Let's do this. Let's go to the next slide, but I'm going to, yeah, you'll see there increased oxygen blood, and then it relieves, yeah, see? So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I just want to see if we have any questions at all. Sorry, folks, just give me a moment. Does anybody have any questions or comments right now regarding what we've covered so far?
I just wanted to say that was supposed to be a private message. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. No worries. It's okay. No problem at all. Thank you. All right, folks. So I'm going to hide everyone again. And then I will share my screen. And then we'll go here. Okay. So blood typing. Blood typing. So this is very interesting. Let me ask you this. You can just shout out. I'm not going to go back to showing everybody, but do you know your blood type? I'm A positive. You don't have to say what blood type. Just say, yeah, I know my blood type, or you can say the blood type. Does anybody know their blood type?
I'm O positive.
Okay, all right, very interesting. Anybody else?
I'm A.
Okay.
Me and all my siblings were all type A.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, so okay, very good. Yeah, so if you don't know your blood type, you should. Yeah, you absolutely should find out. And if you've ever had blood work done, folks, then they'll know. And you could ask when you go for your next doctor's visit, your next appointment with your primary care physician, just ask them, hey, in my chart, does it say what blood type I am? And it'd be good for you to know. Okay, so here's the thing. Differences in human blood types. This is an important thing because if we need a transfusion, if we need additional blood, and we receive a blood type that's not going to coincide with the blood type that we have present within our bodies, that could be a problem, right? So that could trigger a severe immune response. That could be a problem because I want you to see here that with each of these, so there are many different antigens. These are little proteins that are on the surface of a cell, okay? And antigens on a cell will tell the body, our body's immune system in particular, whether a cell is self, meaning it's a part of me, it's normally a part of me, or non-self, meaning that it has come into my body and it's not a body cell for me, and so we need to mount an immune response in order to take care of that cell that's non-self. Well, in the case of, in particular, what we use as far as blood grouping and blood typing, ABO and the RH, the A, type A blood, type B blood, type AB, or type O, and whether it's positive or negative, whether that RH factor is present or not, meaning if I'm A positive, so I have that RH factor present in my blood, right? It's important as far as we don't receive, if I have type A blood, I really should not be receiving B or AB. I can receive O. We'll talk about that because I'm going to show you. But know that it's really important to know the types and to prevent a problem. We'll look at an image. We'll look at this. Very good. Right. So the markers are these antigens. These are these proteins present upon our red blood cells in particular. Okay. Now, if there's no A or B, right, type markers, then you have type O blood. Okay. If you have type A blood, you have an A marker. If you have type B blood, you have a B marker. If you have AB, you have both A and B markers on your plasma membrane of your red blood cell. Okay. Now, the type O is a universal donor. It's very good because it doesn't have the AAB markers at all. Okay. Type AB blood can receive the different types of blood because it's able to take, because it has A and B, it can take type A, it can take type B, and it can take type AB as well as O. Okay, so very important to know that there. Okay. Mixing those incompatible blood types, yeah, it's not a good thing. It leads to this agglutination. This is a clumping that can take place. In the lab, if we had the lab, I would, and I'll actually, let's see here. So we are going to be doing that. I'll do it. I can do a demonstration come lab day in a couple of weeks there, maybe about 2 weeks, where I can show you as far as what takes place as far as doing a lab regarding using synthetic blood and different types of chemicals to show you how we can determine and I can demonstrate in front of you all how we determine whether the synthetic blood is type A, type B, type AB, or type O, and whether it's positive or negative, okay? And this agglutination, this clumping of the cells, that's not a good thing, because that clumping then will prevent blood cells from flowing within the cardiovascular system and prevent oxygen reaching tissues, as well as it could block blood vessels, tiny blood vessels. So it's not a good or healthy thing at all.
I have a question. If you were going to die without blood, can they give you the wrong blood to keep you alive, or is it completely incompatible?
Yeah, so what I would tell you with that is that there's ways that there's solutions that they can give you that can increase the level of fluid. Understood this? The level of fluid within your body. So if you've lost a lot of blood, right, and say there is an issue where they don't have a blood type that's going to match, they can give you fluid, specific types of fluid, right? And this will then go into the IV, go into your cardiovascular system, fill your cardiovascular system with fluid, not so much with blood cells, right? But it'll fill it with fluid, so at least that can keep tissues moving and going, and then they can also give you oxygen. And also, you understand what I'm saying? So there are emergency things that they can do, because it's really a bad thing to receive a different type of blood that's incompatible with your blood. Yeah. Okay.
And is that plasma? Is that what they call plasma?
Yes, yeah. So plasma, but there's other names for it, Ringer solution and such. So there's different other types of solutions, but plasma. So when you just hear someone say plasma, they're looking at increasing the fluid volume. Know this also, that when you lose fluid volume, your blood pressure can drop dramatically, and that's not good either, right? So that can also lead to that can go into shock as a result of a decrease in fluid volume, because your blood pressure drops dramatically, and this can also lead to death. So yeah, it is important not only just to replace cells, blood cells, but also the fluid, the plasma portion. Okay. And so here you're seeing here, as far as this just gives you an example. I'm going to go to the next chart. And so what you're seeing here is that type O blood, right? Type O blood can be given to, so the donor, type O blood, can be given to type O, absolutely, right? A, B, and AB, okay? Type AB blood can receive type O, A, AB, B, and AB. But then you're seeing here, as far as the X's, what's the problem? What can be issues, right? As far as what cannot. So type B blood cannot receive type A blood or type AB, because it has the A antigens and the A antigens here, which will cause a reaction, will cause an immune response. As well as type A blood cannot receive type B or AB, because it has the B antigens. That'll initiate an immune response. And then you'll see here, as far as type O, really what happens is that type O blood has antibodies for type A and B. Okay. Now you'll see here, as far as this, just giving you an example of incompatible blood being transfused. And so what's going on is that you'll see here, as far as that, you see these little pieces right here, these little pieces, right? Those represent antibodies, okay? And the antibodies are part of the immune system, and they'll allow for a clumping to take place, an attachment between cells that are non-self, so that they can all stay grouped together, so that our immune system can then, the macrophages can come along and take care of them via phagocytosis, a form of cell eating. So this is why they all clump together like that, for a reason. The problem is, so you'll see here, as far as that, we can have issues as far as the clumping, and as far as blockage of vessels, and as far as the transport of oxygen to the tissues. So I've said to you all, regarding the A, the AB, the B, the O types, and I mentioned to you about a positive or negative. Well, so what's the deal with that? Okay, so here's what's going on with that. So we have this RH factor. Okay, it's another one of these antigens, these proteins, this surface marker. It's on the surface of the plasma membrane of a red blood cell. Okay, And so if you have it, you're considered Rh positive. So I'm A positive, so I have that. If you are O negative, you would not have the Rh factor. Or if you were A negative or AB negative or B negative, right? You wouldn't have that Rh factor. Well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that if a mother who gets pregnant, right? A woman gets pregnant and she ends up having, she's negative and her baby is positive, that can be a problem. So negative mom, she doesn't have the Rh factor, but a positive baby because whoever that she came in together with had positive blood, and that Rh factor was present, then the baby has a chance to become be a positive blood type for Rh factor, and this can create an immune response in mom. It's not so much of a big deal really the first pregnancy, it's subsequent pregnancies after the first pregnancy where mom ends up, as a result of childbirth, she ends up being exposed to the Rh positive blood from the baby. The baby is born, and during that process of birth, there can be a mixture of mom and baby's blood, and this can then initiate then an immune response present within mom, so that if she comes in contact with an Rh positive again, say the second pregnancy, right, then mom can actually develop an immune response to the baby that's developing within her. Okay, that's a bad thing, right? Get that. So here we go. Rh negative female gets pregnant by an Rh positive male. The fetus has a chance to be Rh negative or positive. If it's positive, then what will happen is that during childbirth, right, antibodies can develop against Rh. And so if another pregnancy occurs and it's an Rh positive baby, then that'll happen as far as mom can develop these antibodies, which will then produce an immune response and look at this, cause its blood cells to burst. So that's not good. Okay, that's very bad. But there's ways that we can go around to helping with this, right? So here we go as far as, you'll see here, Rh positive, Rh negative, fetus if it's positive, right? Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. All right. So then, thank you. So you'll see here these antibodies, right? For the because if she's had a pregnancy with an Rh and they did nothing as far as any type of treatment, then subsequent, second baby or more, if they're Rh positive, mom's antibodies will attack that little baby. Okay. So this is RhoGAM. Okay. So RhoGAM is, I'll show you right here, RhoGAM. Okay. So this immunoglobulin Rh. What'll happen with that is that RhoGAM prevents the Rh negative mom from making antibodies during pregnancy that would cause this HDFN. So this would be an issue where mom develops these antibodies and it develops actually into an immune response on the baby. Okay. As long as the Rh negative mother receives RhoGAM appropriately during every pregnancy, her babies are at very low risk of developing the issue here as far as with the erythroblastosis fetalis is another way we can call that as far as that reaction that can occur. Okay. Now, you'll see here at this next slide, it says that hundreds of other markers are present other than just A and B and O or the lack of AB as well as Rh. Okay. But they don't cause problems during blood transfusions. Okay. So it's not an issue. Cross-matching used in hospitals to exclude the possibility of blood incompatibility due to those markers. And so that's very important so that we don't have an immune response. And the importance of the blood as far as, so we realize that carrying of that oxygen, very, very important as far as via the red blood cells. And I want to share something with you also and to know that as far as carbon monoxide, right? So CO. So carbon monoxide levels can get high in the house as a result of issues with, say, your heating system and such. Different things can occur that can cause these levels of carbon monoxide. So CO2, carbon dioxide, this is what we breathe out, right? But carbon monoxide, very, very deadly, okay? And know that your red blood cells, they have more of an affinity to attract CO, carbon monoxide, to them than they do for even oxygen. And they are very good at transporting oxygen. That's really, when you think of a red blood cell, think of a sack of hemoglobin, this protein, that's just transporting oxygen. That's the key issue with a red blood cell. But they have an even more greater affinity to carry carbon monoxide. So this is why it can be very easy for a person to get carbon monoxide poisoning as a result of the CO entering into the blood, into the respiratory system, into the blood, and really taking over the sites for oxygen over the, so in other words, like carbon monoxide is taking over the sites in the cells where oxygen should be being transported into the red blood cells. So that's a bad thing. Note this, we talked about this as far as people living in high altitudes can have more red blood cells, because I didn't mention that term, but I did say to you that it's important if you're going to train. Training at a higher elevation helps to increase endurance, helps to increase these red blood cells, which will help to increase oxygenation of the tissues, which can help in performance. You'll see here as far as the kidney and the liver function. So kidney function, as far as we'll look in the rest of the urinary system, we'll be talking about how kidneys filter blood, produce a filtrate, it becomes urine, and only a small part of that filtrate actually becomes urine and exits your body, right? The liver, very important in order to, takes a whole lot of blood, because the liver produces these plasma proteins that are flowing throughout the blood. Very important. Liver also is involved in detoxification and other types of functions that are highly important. We'll talk about that more in the digestive system, okay? Interesting of note, you'll see here, it says here, creatinine, right? And we're gonna look at as far as creatine supplementation, right? So very important. I would think that there are some of you that might be involved in exercising and weightlifting and such, and training, and you might take this as a supplement, because what can it do? It can enhance energy production in the cells. Listen to this, improve performance up to 15% as far as gaining muscle and strength and helping with weight loss and such. So you have to be careful though, right, with supplementation, because if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not under some type of guidance by someone who does, a nutritionist, your medical doctor, and just like play your own pharmacist, so to speak, and just take things just because you heard about it, you can create a problem. I'm going to show you in a moment here. So creatinine, right, chemical waste molecule is generated from muscle metabolism, okay? Creatinine is transported through the bloodstream to the kidneys. The kidneys are going to filter out most of the creatinine and dispose of it in the urine. If we have too high levels of this, right? So things can happen, folks. So shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting, dry skin, headaches, loss of appetite, weight loss. So, just like anything else, as far as levels within the body that need to be maintained at a proper, there needs to be a range, a healthy range. Too high or too low, the body needs to homeostatically, right? Homeostasis, stable environment inside of the body, no matter what it is, respiratory rate, blood pressure, these albumin and other types of plasma proteins, as well as, what's going on as far as waste and things that are leaving the body. We have to monitor that. So kidneys, your nervous system, your liver, your lungs, all these areas of the body, there are receptors that are sending information to the brain saying, hey, levels are too high or too low, and what do we need to do to make changes? These are just, you'll see here as far as blood cell tests, blood tests that can be done and have been done. I'm sure if you've got blood work done, you've had some of these tests done in order to determine what's going on as far as healthy levels within your body. Okay. And you'll see here as far as some other tests for you to review and to look at. You've probably heard of, like I said before, the CBC. So it's just, all that means is a complete blood count. And so if we have too low levels of cells or too high levels of cells as a result of infection, you can tell it by a simple complete blood count. Okay. How about as far as the blood urea nitrogen, BUN? As far as, so what's going on with that is that, so what's going on with the function of the kidneys and how they're doing what they're doing? And are we having, and many different types of pathologies, disorders, these levels of whatever we're looking at here, as far as the blood sugar levels, as far as for diabetes, levels of the plasma proteins, these can give us an idea as far as what's going on as far as different types of disorders. How about this also, as far as chorionic, human chorionic gonadotropin hormone? This is what a pregnancy test, when you do a urine sample on the stick, so to speak, it'll see very trace levels of this HCG present if there's a pregnancy. So quite interesting. The term hemostasis, right? So this is a case where we're trying to stop the bleeding that's taking place as a result of some type of damage, injury to blood vessels and such. So as a result of hemostasis, right, we can seal tears, punctures, any type of injuries to damage to blood vessels.
Hey,
yes.
Homeostasis can be especially difficult if a gunshot strikes the femoral artery, though.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely correct, because as the abdominal aorta, right? The abdominal aorta is a very large artery. The femoral artery, very large artery, right? And it's under pressure. So in comparison to a vein, which would be under low pressure, the artery is under high pressure. So if they're ruptured, will blood be pulsing out of that vessel? Yes, absolutely. So yeah, Will, you're correct. Thank you.
Yeah, remember what happened to that late football star Sean Taylor?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. Tell us.
He got shot in the femoral artery and he lost any blood to death, unfortunately. Too much blood.
Yeah. So truly, I've had patients who have worked in different types of industrial environments, and they have been involved in some pretty major accidents that have led to loss of limbs and such. And so if they're not doing any type of first aid immediately to that patient will lose too much blood and they'll die very quickly. Yeah, indeed. So yeah,
That's what happens if they get shot in the femoral artery.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. But yeah, it's pretty sad. Yeah, absolutely sad. So when
real quick, I heard that's why police don't shoot for the legs, because it's so dangerous getting hit in the leg, between either losing part of the leg because of the bone or hitting the artery. Is that true?
I don't know, to be honest. To me, that's quite interesting. It would definitely, yeah. I mean, I could see that, as far as so damaging like the femur, right? That's a very tough fracture to heal from, right? Any type of weight-bearing bone, but especially a large bone like the femur, right? Your thigh bone. I could see how that could be a huge problem. Also, the proximity, the closeness to that femoral artery, sort of like closer to your groin area, that right in like the folds and adjacent to each side of the groin area. In that fold area there, that's called the inguinal region, and that's where the femoral artery, actually, you could palpate it yourself. You could actually get a pulse from the femoral artery in there. Okay, so that wouldn't be. Actually, let me show you that. Let's take a moment, and let me just show you. Yeah, so you'll see here that right in this region right here, okay? So there you've got femoral artery, and so you see right in the inguinal region right here, so very close in proximity there, and you also have a major vein, the great saphenous vein, and that's also present in there. So yeah, so getting shot in any of this region through in here can cause major bleeding, absolutely. I don't see an issue with that at all. That's a rough thing for sure. So
Next, I always figured, why don't they just shoot them in the legs to stop them? And apparently,
yes.
you'll die if you hit that vein.
Yeah. So where did you see that? Where did you read that? Or how did you hear that? Did you just hear that someplace? Or?
It was like National Geographic or one of those, information television documentary things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So you'll see here too, also that as a result of any type of damage to a blood vessel, right? What'll go on right away is that the vessel wall will contract, right, in a spasm, and that'll do is that'll affect how much blood flow is passing through that vessel. So that's important as far as minimizing the amount of blood flowing through that vessel. And then you'll have these platelets that'll come, right? They'll come out of solution and they'll clump and they'll form this temporary plug, which will indeed then send out chemicals from that site to attract more platelets to the area, as well as other blood cells that'll come and form this clot, which will help to block the damage of the blood vessel, and then eventually lead to the healing of the vessel as time goes on. And having different clotting factors, right, present is very important. So someone who have you ever heard of hemophilia, right? So if someone has hemophilia, they could be missing one of these clotting factors, and this can affect how they actually perform hemostasis, stop the bleeding present within the body. So if they play a sport and they fall and they injure themselves, or just bang themselves, right? So they don't have to cause a tear in the skin, but if you just hit yourself hard enough, you get a bruise, right? Well, for us, we get a bruise and okay, it goes away over time. You'll get those little nasty short term, but long term it goes away. Well, in the case of someone who has hemophilia, they don't have some of these one of two clotting factors in particular, and what will happen is that they'll get a bleed, and this bleed will continue and be very slow to heal, and this could be create problems with joints. In particular, it's joints that they seem to have the major issues because of the tiny vessels present within. The term thrombus is a clot. So if you hear the term blood clot, it's called a thrombus as far as medical terminology is concerned. So thrombosis, the clotting mechanism, okay, triggered by the release of substances outside the blood. Okay, so you'll have these different. So it's quite an elaborate mechanism for hemostasis, the stoppage of bleeding and the healing of vessels and such. I want to show you here. So you'll see here as far as 1, injury to the blood vessel. 2, walls of the vessel contract, reducing the amount of blood flowing through the area where there's damage. 3, platelets are sticking there's fibers also that will come out of solution and weave, right, with the platelets, and also blood cells will come to that area and form that, not only just the plug, but then they'll form the actual area where there's going to be the clot, and this will lead to the formation, the healing of the damaged vessel. Now, the term embolus, right? So we have a clot then starts circulating in the bloodstream, and when that embolus then reaches an area where it's actually a very tiny vessel and it actually blocks the vessel, then what will happen is that, like we said with the example of a heart attack, myocardial infarction earlier in the class, what's distal to that blockage, tissues will die. Right? So very dangerous, very scary. Right? Stroke can occur, so we can have issues where in the nervous system we can have a clot that actually then becomes travels and then becomes an embolism, then blocks an area, a tiny vessel, and it'll damage part of the brain, damage the heart, damage the lungs, damage any part of the body where there's small vessels that are distal to it, not receiving blood flow. I mentioned to you earlier there regarding the phagocytes. Okay, so phagocytosis, I said that cell eating, it's the macrophage. The monocyte becomes the macrophage after a short period of time, right? And what will happen is that macrophage either be traveling in the blood or it'll be in different tissues of the organs of the body, and it'll act as the cleanup crew. It'll act to remove and process and recycle old cells. I think that's the best way to put it. As far as wound healing is concerned, right? So they'll clean up the debris of dead tissue and such and dead cells, and scab formation occurs as a result of. So let's look at this image right here. So you're seeing here, the clot is in the damaged epidermis, right? The epidermis is the outer layer of the skin. The dermis is the supportive layer. Remember, the epidermis doesn't have blood vessels, but here there are blood vessels, and so they will enter into that area. They're going to, sorry. Okay, so you'll see here, as far as scab formation takes time, and it's going to then aid in the actual renewal of the epidermis. And what happens, folks, is that this bottom layer of the epidermis is where mitosis occurs, where cell formation, new cells are produced, and they're pushed to the surface, okay? So new cells are at the bottom here, at the base, and they're pushed to the surface and then over time, those new cells will replace the damaged area. And so this is why, and also understand that the scab is an important part of what's taking place, this whole healing of the healing process. And removing the scab really doesn't help matters. But how many of us, you know, it's like you've got a scab there and you're like, oh, I just got to pick at it. And then you start more bleeding. You're not helping yourself. So don't pick at the scab. It's not a good thing. All right. So this is just interesting as far as talking about becoming a blood donor, and it's a good thing to do. Doesn't take very long, right? Donation process itself takes about 10 minutes. You know, they give you a little bit of orange juice, you give you a little juice and some food, and you're good, folks. And you know, might feel a little tired, a little fatigued afterwards, but it goes away shortly, and your body reproduces it. Your body, as a result of passing through the kidneys, it's realizing that there's low levels of oxygen as a result of it's being taken from your body, the blood, and so we're going to reproduce more blood cells as far as and also plasma, and you know, it's all good, and it will help many other people. And tested for HIV, tested for Hep C, and I'm sure there are other also panels that are done in order to test, making sure that our blood supply is very safe. Back in the 80s, that was an issue for sure. Anemia and malaria. So let's do this. If we can take a quick 5-minute break. We'll come back. We just have like 10 slides to go, folks. If you can give me just about 5 minutes, we're at 3:02. So let's start at 3:07. We'll come back and we'll finish up our chapter. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to continue sharing my screen with you all at this slide right here at the blood disorders, and we'll be back in 5 minutes, folks. Thank you. All right, folks, so we'll start in just a moment here. I'll give you like a minute warning, and then we'll begin in 1 minute. Okay, so come back to your stations and to your desks there and your computers, and we'll start in 1 minute. All right, folks, so let's finish up our session today. And we're going to finish off with looking at some different disorders as far as the blood is concerned. So anemia is something, a term that many of you are familiar with, have heard. Maybe you don't know what it is, what it means, right? So what'll take place is that the red blood cells not delivering enough oxygen, okay? So that's a problem. Okay. So anemia, so in the case of, and I mentioned to this story earlier there, as far as iron deficiency anemia. So as a result of low levels of iron within the body, we're going to have an issue where we're not going to be able to transport enough oxygen to the tissues, and this can lead to different types of symptoms as far as fatigue is one of them, okay? Pernicious anemia, aplastic anemia, these are all different types of, as a result of certain components that are going to take place that'll affect the amount of erythrocytes flowing through the body, okay, and being present in the body. Malaria, right, can cause a hemolytic anemia, and so this can be this can damage and cause destruction of red blood cells, which can affect again the transport of oxygen to the tissue. So you know, I don't think the importance of not getting bit by mosquitoes is, I don't think people have, now the Zika virus, right? We know as far as we don't want mosquitoes biting us and things that can occur as a result of that, but really like mosquitoes just carry nasty viruses and illnesses. You don't want to get bit by mosquitoes. So if you're out and about during spring and summer and fall, and you're out in the woods, you're walking, whatever you're doing, you know, at least treat your clothes, if not your skin, but treat your clothes with different types of products. That there's natural products as well as there's DEET type products, so whatever you choose to take, but to try and repel insects is a wise idea. And here you're just seeing just the changes that can occur as a result of having a deficiency in just something as simple as iron. Here you're seeing as far as sickle cell anemia, and what'll take place is that there can be sickling, the change of these healthy red blood cells into a sickle shape. The sickle shape will not, and this is as a result in the presence of low levels of oxygen, okay? And these sickled cells can get stuck in smaller blood vessels, okay? And they're also not transporting oxygen. So not only can they get stuck in small vessels, they can cause pain, very bad pain in joints, and they can also lead to a lack of oxygen being transported to the tissues. This is something that's quite interesting here, as far as just something of note, okay? So the hypothesis, if in malaria-infected cells, the oxygen level is lowered enough to cause sickling. But this sickling can also lead to, because there's low oxygen levels, can kill and destroy the parasite that's present that causes malaria, okay? So what they're saying is that they're showing you that depending upon the location and the genetics, this can lead to issues where you can actually have an advantage to fighting against malaria, okay? Simple as that. There's still more studies that need to be done, but this is just something in particular that's quite interesting. Here you're seeing as far as what takes place as far as the first vector, that what's transporting the malaria parasite would be a mosquito, right? And in particular, it's a pregnant female mosquito. So female mosquito, she's carrying it. She's then going to have this desire then to attack a host, a human host, taking blood, right? And as a result of this taking of the blood, then there's going to be a mixture of the mosquito's blood with the human's blood, and that malarial parasite can be transmitted, can lead to in utero transmission, which is terrible, to the fetus, the baby, in the liver, and it can cause major changes within the red blood cells. And it's terrible. Then what can happen is that now this person has been infected, they get bit, right? And then that mosquito then can maybe transport it over to another human host. It's bad stuff. Malaria is a nasty illness, terrible illness. Mononucleosis. Know that the Epstein-Barr virus, right? So the majority of people in the United States, over 90% of the people in the United States carry the Epstein-Barr virus, from figures that I remember off the top of my head there. It doesn't make everybody sick, right? Just like even when we talk about with what's going on with COVID and such, that it doesn't make everyone sick. And so as such, know this, that the Epstein-Barr virus, it's the etiology, it's the cause of infectious mononucleosis, and it can make some people very sick. But the majority of the population do not get sick, but they carry it and they can transmit it. Okay? Triggers an overproduction of lymphocytes, of white blood cells. Okay? HIV, it's a virus. Okay? It'll attack in particular helper T cells, these T lymphocytes. These are a special type of white blood cell that's involved in the specific immune response in the body. And it can lead to a autoimmune response where the body's immunity is not functioning like it properly should, and this can lead to AIDS, full-blown AIDS, where it's an autoimmune disorder and it can lead to death for a short period of time if not treated. But there's a lot of treatments out there right now. There's a lot of different medications that can really make a difference as far as in HIV treatment. So it's not a cure, but it can definitely make an improvement in one's life and life expectancy. As far as leukemia is concerned, so we're having these elevated high levels of white blood cells present. Okay, white blood cells should be present in certain amounts to fight infection, to be involved in the whole immune process. But if we have very high levels of white blood cells, that's also not a positive thing. Okay, excuse me. So really know that, like we said before, homeostasis, there needs to be a range, right? There's a range. In the range, we're good. Outside, above, or too low, not a good thing, right? So that healthy range. So when there's too high white blood cells, leukocytes present, lead to leukemia. If not treated, you know, now there are slow and fast moving leukemias, right? And even the slow leukemia, if you're not treating it, you can die from it. So really, it will kill you eventually. So it needs to be treated. Here's as far as mononucleosis is concerned, and one of the key issues here is that the spleen acts as a storage for excess blood, right, as a reservoir for blood. And if that's enlarged, right, it's quite enlarged, and you get hit or you fall and that spleen bursts, that's quite a lot of blood loss in a very short period of time, and people can die as a result. Okay? So I think I remember, I don't know if it was in Peaburg or what town, but the young gentleman who a few years ago was playing football, he had mono, he had a very enlarged spleen, and he got, from playing football, from getting tackled, whatever, his spleen ruptured, and he ended up dying as a result. So a young man, not even graduating high school.
He went to Warren Hills.
Warren Hills, okay. All right.
Yeah, because I was a sophomore when that happened.
Wow. Very sad, right? Very sad. And you know what? Know that you can live without a spleen. So it's not necessary. Okay. it's, you're not going to die as a result of having to have your spleen removed. You don't need a spleen transplant. So just know that there. But yeah, you can see all these different symptoms as a result of that Epstein-Barr virus. Here, this is just giving you some information regarding HIV treatment. Facts, sorry, not facts, not treatment, facts. I was reading the top one here. There we go, yeah. So you see here, as far as people on effective HIV treatment can't pass it on, right? So it helps to neutralize, suppressing the virus. HIV can't be passed on through day-to-day contact, right? So can affect anyone, that's true. People living with HIV can live long and healthy lives, and that's true also because although there isn't a cure, right, there is an excellent treatment that's available, right? And early diagnosis, very important in making sure that you're able to receive the correct treatment that you need. Many ways to prevent HIV, right? So getting regularly tested for it, so that if you are sexually active, because we don't want to pass it on to others, absolutely. We want to practice safe sex practices. So this PrEP or PEP, this is also something that is involved in tablets which prevent HIV either before or just after you've been exposed to it. New technology, pretty amazing stuff. Using condoms, safe sex, never sharing needles, taking your medication if you're living with HIV, right? These are all so that it stays suppressed. Very important in order to not transmit it to others and be healthy yourself. Leukemia. So I said to you that there are acute forms, and I didn't say the term acute and chronic, but so in other words, there are slow moving, right? So you'll see here as far as the acute forms, grows quickly, right? The slow chronic forms, they're growing slowly. And you'll see here as far as common in adults 55 and above. And you see here also the chronic cases primarily. It's the kids primarily, although the acute myelogenous, right, they can be also in adults. But they'll all lead to death if not treated, even though even the slow ones can eventually lead to a patient's death if untreated. Carbon monoxide, right? So I said to you that it prevents hemoglobin from binding with oxygen, right? And that higher affinity for carbon monoxide than oxygen, very important. Symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning include headache, this feeling of this wooziness, this lightheadedness, very dangerous. So everyone should have carbon monoxide detectors present within their house in order to prevent this. Okay? Septicemia, right? So some bacteria release toxins that poison the blood. So this can, as a result of like a Staphylococcus aureus or Staph aureus, we would say, very common bacteria. And know that like bacteria are all over our bodies. They're all over our bodies. They're inside of different areas of our bodies. And they're usually, we're healthy well with them. We live a symbiotic relationship with bacteria. But there are certain bacteria, the bacteria that are on your skin shouldn't be inside of your body. There are bacteria that in your digestive system that shouldn't be on your body, right? If they're in the right places, they're okay. If they're in different places, it can make you sick. So, depending upon what type of bacteria and where it's located, and in particular, we're talking about in the blood, this can make you sick. So it's not really good to have bacteria flowing throughout the blood, okay? Should not have bacteria there. The urine, your urine, right? In your urinary tract, there shouldn't be bacteria present in there, except for at like the distal portion of your urethra, where actual urine is passing out of your body. Really, you shouldn't have bacteria in the urinary tract because that would be what? A urinary tract infection, UTI, or in the urinary bladder, kidneys, bacteria there, not good. But bacteria in the small intestines, large intestines, there's issues in particular to large intestines where we want the bacteria to be present in order to help to process, and we'll talk about that digestive system. I won't go any further. So here we see as far as toxemia, right? So metabolic poisons are in the body. So how about if the kidneys are not doing their function, right? And so they end up becoming, so a patient has to go on dialysis. So the kidneys are not filtering the blood like they should. They're not removing the toxins. The liver's not functioning and doing what it needs to do. So what's going to happen is that we're going to end up developing these poison levels within the body that are not being removed, and this can be a problem. So buildup of waste prevents normal replacement of red blood cells. Anemia can result, and also clotting issues also can result, and this can be very bad. All right, so let's stop recording.